Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs, welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. I'm your host, Dave, and today is my birthday, May 10th. In 1976, I was born, and today I am 43 years old. I don't feel 43. I feel like I kind of stopped feeling older-ish around like 35, aside from knowing that I'm more fragile and having back problems and knee problems and that sort of thing. Like, obviously all of that's happening, but as far as that's about maybe 30, 35 is when I stopped mentally not maturing, because I do feel like I'm wiser. I do feel like I'm more tolerant. I do feel like I'm a better person, but interest-wise, I'm kind of just into the same stuff that I've always been in, which is why today, on the way home from work, I purchased Star Wars Escape from Death Star game, which is a very sort of German-sounding title. This is a reproduction of a game. I'm opening it right here on the podcast. This is a reproduction of a game that I had when I was a child. My granny, who is no longer with us, would go around to garage sales and buy board games and toys and weird things for me to have to entertain myself when we went to visit them up in North Carolina. And all of the stuff that she got stayed up there. That was stuff for Granny and Papa's house. So the original 1977, like late 77, early 78, I think, Escape from Death Star was one of the games up there, and I never had it at home. We only had it at Granny and Papa's. We played it every single time I went up there. And I love it. I loved it so much. It was because we didn't have VHS and DVD of the Star Wars movies. This was one of the ways that we relived that amazing, magical experience that was Star Wars. So Hasbro has done something really cool this year and has finally, and we've talked about this on the show before, with how big reaction figures are, how big retro toys are, so many different things making a comeback, like, Mad Balls and even like Thundercats Classics and the new He-Man style figures of DC characters and whatever else. With all of these retro style toys coming back, how is Hasbro not reissuing original Star Wars figures, the Kenner style figures? It seemed crazy to me for a while now, and like I said, we've talked about it on the show, and finally they are. I don't know if this stuff is exclusive to Target or if it will eventually make its way elsewhere. It's not available on Hasbro Pulse, which I found kind of annoying because I've been buying basically every Hasbro product I get now. I get through Hasbro Pulse because they pack it carefully, they ship it quickly. Everything has arrived in great condition and in a very timely manner. I love it. I love Hasbro Pulse. But this stuff is not available there. It is thus far only available at Target. And as a matter of fact, this Star Wars Escape from Death Star game I had to buy it and go pick it up at the store. I couldn't even... I apologize, I'm opening it now because this game includes, and this is not the main draw for me is the game itself, but this game includes a vintage-style Grand Moff Tarkin action figure that was never released in the original Kenner line, which is insane because he's the main villain of the first Star Wars movie that was ever released to the public. It's absolutely crazy that this is the first time we've gotten a figure of him in this style. I don't know what Kenner was thinking, other than old man in gray suit is possibly not that appealing to our young buyers. So I have just pulled Grand Moff Tarkin out of here. He's on a gorgeous card that matches the rest of the cards. There's 6 other figures in this particular wave of reissues. I found a set of 6 figures on a peg in the wrong section of the toy aisle a few days ago. I was thrilled because I want these. I could be cynical and say, oh, I've already got them, or who needs these reproductions or whatever. But I love them. I think they look fantastic. I love the card. The card. These are not going to be mistaken for the originals. The figures are different. The cards are different. They are artificially worn, which I think is a great look. I really love it. They have a huge, somewhat unattractive retro collection série sticker on the front that I don't care for at all. I wish they hadn't done that. And it's really not necessary because this is clearly a modern product. And it says Disney on it also. But I got to say, this Grand Moff Tarkin looks pretty darn amazing. I mean, if you didn't know better, you'd think, oh, well, this is a reproduction of the 1978 Grand Moff Tarkin. When in fact, this is a modern production that just looks very, very convincing. So I'm going to set him aside over here with the rest of my retro figures, the other 6 figures that have been released so far, and I'm going to take a look at the board game itself. It's exactly how I remember it. You've got red, blue, green, and yellow markers of Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie, so you can have up to 4 players playing the game. The board is beautiful. The R2-D2 spinner that I had actually completely forgotten about is beautiful. I'm looking at these cards that tell you specific things that happen in the game with this incredible art on them. You guys, if you find this thing at your local Target, it's only $20, which the retro figures are $10 a piece. So you're paying $10 for Grand Moff Tarkin. You're paying $10 for a complete entire board game that you can play with your family and friends. I have not played it in probably 30 years, so I can't tell you how fun it is or isn't, but I can tell you I loved playing it back then, and I'm looking at this board right now with the pictures on it and the images from the movie and this weird grid thing where you have to outwit the TIE fighters. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. This is a wonderful re-release, and I recommend it to everyone. The only thing is, once you take Grand Moff Tarkin out, there's a big hole in the front of the box, which I don't love. But that's okay, because this game is not for displaying, it's for playing. Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, my excitement there, what a great way to kick off my birthday weekend, which, by the way, lots of plans. I have plenty in store for myself. It's going to be a great time. I'm very excited about what we're doing with the family, what I'm doing with some friends. This is a good year thus far. The trainee at work, I think I mentioned I'm training somebody at work, and as smart as he is, as good as he is, it's very difficult training somebody to do the job that I do. It is very stressful. It is very... it takes a long time, 3 months of 12-hour days of having another person in your face always. So no matter how nice they are, it gets old. But this guy's great, and this was my last day with him. He is taking his big tests over the next 3 days, or over 3 days next week, and then he takes over, and I am done training for hopefully another 6 years. We'll see how that goes. So that's great news also. Very excited about that. Oh, hey, maybe I should tell you about today's episode. Why don't I do that? Today I am talking to Mr. Chad J. Shonk about Jordan Peele's film Us. I love this movie. Just sitting here right now thinking about the conversation that I had with Chad about it. I want to watch it again, like immediately. I can't wait to own this movie and really dig into it. I need the soundtrack. I need special features. I need a commentary. I need everything. I adore this movie. It made me think. It amazed me. The performances are wonderful. But, of course, we're going to talk about all that in the meat of the show. So hang in there, stay tuned, and we're going to talk to Chad from the left coast about us. What else is going on? I have taken a deep dive into the Major Wrestling Figure Podcast, which is hosted by Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins under their real names. Matt Cardona and Brian Myers, I think is correct. I've listened to like 6 episodes now in the past 2 days or something. Not the past 2 days, the past 4 days, which is still kind of ridiculous. But I'm addicted. I love listening to these guys talk about toys. They've got a great chemistry. The show is a lot of fun, and it's gotten me wanting to buy wrestling figures. Now, I do collect some wrestling figures. I am currently collecting women because, to me, the best part of WWE right now are the women's storylines and the women's matches. So I'm buying pretty much every female figure they put out. I've got Shayna Baszler on pre-order. I've got the Ultimate Ronda Rousey on pre-order. I just picked up what turned out to be the Chase variant of Sonya Deville, who's in black gear instead of red gear like the regular figure. And the black gear looks really good, especially next to Mandy Rose. So I've got the 2 of them now. And then I got Nikki Cross not too long ago, and then Ruby Riott, who is one of the best action figures I have ever owned. The deco's incredible. And then I also collect the retro WWF figures, a little bit the LJN figures. So there are a couple of things I collect wrestling-wise. I'm thinking about trying to start collecting every WCW figure that Mattel puts out. I don't know. The more I listen to this show, the more likely I am to succumb to that sort of thing. But anyway, those guys are really funny and charming, and I love listening to their show. And they've got great stories, great background. They talk a lot about like prototypes and stuff. They know the business, and it's a cool show. And I am the degrees of separation between myself and Hawkins and Ryder are very minimal. Because they know our friend Chris DePetrillo from Figures Toy Company, who's been on the show many times, and also Rick Michaels, who I have worked with or had worked with for years when I was in the wrestling business, actually creates Zack Ryder's ring gear. So I'm right there. I'm right there. One degree of separation, I think that would be from Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins and their wrestling figure podcast that I would love to go on and have absolutely no chance in hell of doing so. So anyway, that's what's going on with me. Okay, so last week I mentioned that I want to get better about putting over stuff that I love. So what I'm going to do is put over our pals, the Casket Creatures. You know Ryan Cadaver. He's on every Needless Commentary and is on the show more often than that even. But the Casket Creatures, incredible band. Google them. Get their music. Check out their stuff. Check out the video for Phantom Zone, which I am in. Electrocuting Bitches, which is great fun for me. And also, this Sunday at the Masquerade, May the 12th, the Casket Creatures are playing with the 69 Eyes and a bunch of other bands that I apologize for not remembering right now, but I just got off of 2 long days of work. I'm very tired. I've just started drinking, and I'm getting ready to start for real celebrating my birthday. So please forgive me, the rest of the bands, but Casket Creatures and the 69 Eyes at the Masquerade in Atlanta, Georgia, Sunday, May the 12th. If you can't make it out there, Google the Casket Creatures and check out some of the best horror punk rock you've ever heard in your life, especially their new album, Return to Wolfton, which was the number 2 best album I bought last year. And look, number 1 was Ghost. Prickly who. And you guys know how I feel about that, and how our friend Ryan Cadaver feels about that. So that's no small feat right there. So anyway, and now I'm going to leave you in the capable, rockin' hands of our pals, the Mystery Men, who you can also Google and visit at themysterymenofsurf.com. Enjoy one of their songs, and then listen in as me and Chad do our level best to break down the masterpiece that is us.
let's get into it.
Yeah, let's just get into it.
Introduce it. Let's go.
So at this point, you and I have both... Chad,
Dave.
We need to talk about Us.
Well, we know each other a long time.
We have known each other a long time, and we've both seen a specific movie twice now in the theater.
Yes.
Because we knew we wanted to talk about Us.
We do. Now, normally, if someone says we need to talk about Us, pain is going to follow.
Right. It's not a good conversation.
No,
this, on the other hand,
you don't want your wife saying that to you.
No. But
no.
This is going to be a great conversation.
Yes.
Because we get to meet a new person here on the Needless Things podcast, and that is Chad Shonk, other than Star Wars fan, Chad Shonk.
I have talked about X-Men and Buffy on here, but Buffy is another thing in which I do not have critical faculties about.
How about this? We're not talking to fanboy Chad Shonk.
No, that we are not. Although I am a fan of this film, but
yeah. But this is in a different way. Like with this, you went in with nothing was presupposed. You went in with your film critic eyes ready to. I just
went in. It's just a film, and it's a film that brings about a lot of reaction and a lot of things to think about. And yes, I will admit, when I'm on here talking about Star Wars, I do tend to shut off. I hate the phrase, but shut off part. I don't shut off part of my brain. I just let my heart take over, and I just like things that are Star Wars. But one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you about this is the one thing I am not is a horror movie fan.
Right.
I enjoy a good horror film. But unlike Star Wars, where my bar can be very low, my bar for horror films is fairly high. I need a film to be a good film that happens to be a horror film.
Right.
It being a horror film is not enough to get me interested. And that is in no way to disparage people who do. Because sure. I have my own things that are just that way.
Yeah, we all have our own tastes and things that get us going and stimulate our brains or whatever, and that's fine. That makes the world more interesting.
But I'm not the type of person that runs out to see a horror flick just because it's a horror flick. I'm not someone who can sit through watching all the Friday the 13th movies. I've seen them all, but I probably won't see them ever again.
Right.
Because to me, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but the worst slasher films are, not even the worst, the average slasher film to me feels like porn. And I don't, in the sense that it's wading through really bad performances and acting and writing to get to the money shots.
Right.
And it's what it feels like to me in kind of the really, comedies can be the same way, by the way, especially, like older comedies can be that way too, where you sit through a bunch of crappy plot stuff just to get to the funny scenes. So I don't love it, but I know you love horror films, and so when you said to talk about this, I was like, yeah, this is good, because we both are at it from a different point of view, and maybe you can help me appreciate it more as a horror film.
Well, and that's
why I can help you appreciate it more as a film.
That's why I specifically wanted to talk to you, because it's not just a matter of I love horror, and I have, while horror is enough to draw me in, I do engage the critical part of my brain a little bit more, not as, is this a good film, but is this a good horror film? Because to me, those are two different things generally.
Yeah.
But
and they can be, yeah.
Because of your critical mind, and also the fact that as far as sort of social awareness goes, you're much more than I am. So I wanted to pick your brain about that aspect of this movie too, because there's so much in here that moved me and that was an effective message that, a lot of times it's really clunky to put social commentary into films. It's not done well. Here, I feel like it was done in a way that's very engaging. It's very in your face, but it gives you enough to chew on and think about that it's not overbearing. I don't feel like I'm getting hit over the head with a hammer. I feel like I'm getting hit over the head with a very interesting puzzle.
No, I agree. I would recommend people check out your little write-up that you did on the site, though, because you say you don't have as much of a grasp on it, I think you did understand a lot of the social implications of the film, in the notes that you wrote up.
In the event that somebody who's not already familiar with me reads that, I don't want them to think that I'm saying I am an expert on such things, and you should listen to what I say. Like, I want to make sure that I'm only a very casual sort of...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
well, no, and it was written in a very colloquial way. I don't think it came across that way. I think it came across as, but you having some understanding of it, of what the film could be about or what he's trying to get across. But yeah, we should just jump into it and talk about, how do you want to start? You just want to talk about what we were like going into the film, or?
Yeah, let's discuss that a little bit, because I as far as just who he is as a person and his background and his experience and his history and what he seems to want to accomplish, I adore Jordan Peele.
Yep.
I didn't love Get Out as much as everybody else did. What I loved about it was how much discipline I saw in the way that he shot it, and how effectively he did what he wanted to do. But it was... It just didn't blow me away like it did so many other people. But it made me very excited to see what else he was going to do. And when the first trailer I saw for Us indicated to me that he had refined what he was doing a little bit, and I was super stoked going into this movie. Like I didn't go into this like, well, I didn't love the last one, let's hope he does better. I went into this like, oh man, I think we're watching this guy grow, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a very good way of looking at it. I have never seen an episode of Key and Peele.
Oh wow.
Well, I cut the cord a while back, and so I only watch things on demand. And sketch comedy is not something that I seek out. Sketch comedy has always been something that I find. When I became a Kids in the Hall fan by stumbling on it. I became even when I was a little kid, a SCTV fan by stumbling on it late at night. You know,
sure.
Even things, not even sketch, but I don't know, comedies, shows like that. Even something like Mr. Science Theater, my brother and I just stumbled upon one time. So for Key and Peele, while I heard of things about it, it's not something I was going to go online and find a place it was streaming and buy an episode or something. I just never was going to do that. What I had seen was the Obama's Anger Translator sketches.
Yes.
And the reason I've seen those is because they get shown in other media.
Right.
Even on like legitimate news sites would show them, right? And so that was my impression of Jordan Peele going into Get Out, which was someone who was very funny but also had something to say, you know, because those sketches are funny, but they're also about the fact that the first black president of the United States cannot show as much emotion as he may want to out of fear of being seen as an angry black man.
Right.
So there was I'd like to first of all point out that we are two white, middle-aged, middle-class straight men.
Yes.
And we are going to be making assumptions, talking about things about this film. Just keep that in mind, that we're just keep that in mind, that we're not going to know all the answers. Just so you know where we're coming from. But so Get Out, I was a huge fan of, and it fit the mold of what I had seen from those sketches, which was very funny with a racial and political bent to them and something to say. Get Out is what I liked about Get Out was, and we'll get into this with Us, is, and I think I posted this on Facebook, I really do feel like Jordan Peele must be a huge fan of Back to the Future. And I know that seems weird, but I'm a big fan of films that hide the entire last act of the movie in the first act, where everything you need to know about the film they tell you in the first half hour. And in Get Out is such a textbook example of setting them up and knocking them down. Everything that comes up in the first half hour of Get Out plays out in the rest of the movie. In the same way that if you go back and watch Back to the Future, every fact that is brought up in Back to the Future matters. And you will see every single thing play out. It's almost as if the entire film is he just tells you what it's going to be. You just don't know it the first time. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of Get Out. it's a very blunt movie in what it's about. I mean, there's no way you can't get around the fact that it's about race.
Yeah.
What he's trying to say, what he wants you to take away from it, that can be up for interpretation. The thing I also liked about Get Out was that he could have made a very funny, interesting, dark film just about a guy going home and spending the weekend with his white girlfriend's parents. Like, that could have been the whole movie. And he could have made a very interesting film about that, because any black friends I've talked to about Get Out, they're just kind of like, yep, that's what it's like at your parties. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No. Yeah. No. And they just kind of nodding along with the movie, going like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so the observational stuff that makes up the first half of Get Out is, I thought, would have been enough to sustain me, honestly. And then it takes a crazy turn, and gets, I wouldn't necessarily call either of these films supernatural. They're actually more science fiction than supernatural, because all of the problems are man-made in them.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I like a lot, is when it is a horror movie, but it doesn't. And look, I love my supernatural horror, but I love when it's, look, this is a man-made thing. This is within the realm of technological possibility. This is imminent horror possibility.
Right.
Like, I dig that a lot.
Well, and there's also the societal implications that these ills are created by man.
Yes.
Right? That these ills are not, these problems are not the product of some being from another dimension. They're made by human beings. And even if they're outlandish as they are Get Out, or as they are in Us, and in Us, this is a big question, which is, these are problems made by man. And that makes them a little more frightening in a lot of ways. I remember there was a movie years ago with Robert Carlyle. They tried to make a Hitler biopic for TV with Robert Carlyle.
Oh.
And they did make it, but there was a lot of criticism of the film ahead of time because they were afraid that it humanized Hitler too much. And I always found that to be an interesting argument, because he was human, and that's what's frightening about him.
Right.
It's easy to portray, it's easy to make someone a demon or say Hitler was just pure evil or whatever. But no, he was a human being like you and me. And human beings are capable of all shit. And I think that's part of what Peele does here by having not the roots be opening some supernatural book or, conjuring up a demon or some being risen from the grave. In both cases here, they're the results of human experimentation and human choice. And so it's interesting. But I will say this with Us. I like to Get Out so much that I did not watch a trailer for Us. I did not read a synopsis for Us. All I knew was it was directed by Jordan Peele, and it had my future wife on the poster.
Man, and isn't she fantastic?
I apologize to my real wife, but she would probably leave me for Lupita as well. So I knew nothing. I didn't even know about the doubles. I knew nothing about the film going in, and I'm so glad.
Well, I watched the trailer, but to me, the trailer, yes, it revealed the doubles, but it didn't reveal much other than the tone of the film, which is, and this is one of the things that I like, is that Jordan Peele is he's not making comedy horrors. He's making horrors that have people doing funny things in the way that people do, right. Whether it's Winston Duke being, stereotypical joke dad.
He's so good. He's so good.
Oh, he's fantastic. And I love...
he has the best line in the movie. We'll get to it.
There is an interview with Jordan Peele about casting Winston Duke, who the wider, anybody who hasn't seen Us knows him as M'Baku from Black Panther.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele saying, I wasn't sure about casting him because how are we going to create any kind of tension when M'Baku is your father?
Right.
And that Winston Duke basically convinced him, that he could play this goofball guy. and man, did he ever. But you have characters who do funny things, but nothing is played for comedy, per se.
No, I think they're both very funny movies.
Yes.
But being funny doesn't make it a comedy.
Correct.
I do believe that Winston Duke is good friends with Lupita Nyong'o, and I think she was the one that got him the job in Black Panther, or pushed for him to be in Black Panther. Because I do believe they have been friends for a long time.
Okay.
So having them, then seeing them as a couple in this movie, I hope T'Challa doesn't see this, but but I will say his performance in Black Panther is very funny
and very memorable
and very warm as well. There's a warmth to him.
He could have easily been a sort of, because the Marvel movies have a large stable of generic supporting characters that are just kind of there. They're cool. They get to do some stuff, and then you don't necessarily remember anything about them. He is not one of those. He is a guy that you looked at and were like, man, I hope he gets a bigger role in whatever he's in next. Whatever. I hope M'Baku gets something meaty next time.
And on paper, I bet he was a lot more like that generic character you're thinking of.
I bet you're right.
But the Winston Duke brought to life. So yeah, he's very, very good. But yeah, I hadn't. But you had seen the trailer. So what is? I still haven't watched the trailer, by the way. What does the trailer? So the trailer does show you their doubles.
It's very clear that Lupita Nyong'o is the, we'll speak in normal terms of this. It's very clear that she's the antagonist and the protagonist.
Okay.
And it's very clear that the family is facing off against a similar family. But for me personally, I didn't pick up that they were all duplicates at that point. To me, the trailer was just establishing a tone of anxiety and horror.
Right.
It didn't really. I didn't know what the plot was. I mean, sitting watching this movie, there were and I won't call them twists, but when it opened up into the larger world, I was very surprised when we saw that there were. For me, the biggest twist of the movie was not at the end finding out that the mother was actually the tethered, because again, from the beginning, that was apparent to me. And what the movie did that was interesting was made me question whether or not what I assumed to have happened really happened, because it shows us the mother is a very warm, caring character, and you wonder, well, if she's this evil, because for the intents and purposes, at the beginning, whatever's going on, you assume these are evil doppelgangers.
Yes. No, they're pretty scary.
And they are scary, but they're not scary because they're evil. They're scary because we don't understand them.
Yes. They do stab people with scissors, though.
They do, but we'll get more into that. We'll get more into that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I went in the beginning, and we'll just get right into it. In the beginning, when she goes into the House of Mirrors, I had the same thought you had, which was that they probably swapped. Mm-hmm. But I completely forgot about that.
Oh, interesting.
That, and I think it's kind of the same experience you had. You probably kept it. It sounds like you kept it more in the front of your mind.
Oh, I did. I mean, that to me was the movie.
I completely forgot that for the film, which is why it was exciting going back and watching a second time and giving it a Sixth Sense test and seeing if the twist holds up. And we can talk about that, and I think it does. But I felt that it wasn't. I thought it was more ambiguous than that. Again, when we talk about the differences, I think you were very much going on what you know about horror movies as well. That movie. Oh, yes. And what they filling in what they didn't show you.
Yeah,
right.
And that's
we don't see her running away.
One of the best things about being a parent is watching movies with your kid and realizing that they haven't done all the learning that you have.
Yes.
My son doesn't have 42 years worth of watching movies, so he still gets delighted at things that I saw coming. He's still surprised when characters do things. He's still he's getting to start fresh. He doesn't have this encyclopedia of knowledge that I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly what it was, is every once in a while I still get taken by surprise. As a matter of fact, this movie took me by surprise at one point, but in general terms, I know how movies work.
Yes, no, I mean, we talked about this when I was little and Han Solo saved the day at the end of Star Wars. I lost my fucking mind because I had no idea that was going to happen. Anyone over the age of 30 probably knew exactly that was going to happen, but I had no clue because I didn't know how things worked.
Right.
So I think you're right about the mood this movie sets, because then let's talk about the beginning image real quick, because I think one of the keys to understanding this film, and since we don't have forever, we should kind of dive into it.
Yeah.
For people who are too young to remember Hands Across America, which is the first image. The first image of a film is an important one. It sets the mood. Sometimes it's just kind of cool looking. Sometimes it says something. Sometimes it's just a way to draw you in to the film. In this case, it's just an old-ass cathode ray, kids ask your parents, television, with a commercial for Hands Across America.
Flanked by some very specific VHS tapes.
Yes. The only two I noticed were Chud, which I don't believe they're cannibals, but we do have a movie full of humanoid underground dwellers. And then was it The Man with Two Brains?
Man with Two Brains, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Right Stuff, a generic tape called Thursday Nights.
Interesting.
And, but yeah, all of them.
It was Must-See TV a thing in '86 yet? Was Cosby on Thursday night?
Oh, for sure. Yet? You're right. That was it, and that's why it says Thursday Night and not The Cosby Show, because of the whole Cosby thing.
It's a black family, so they're probably recording Cosby in a different world and stuff like that.
The good call, man, because I've been trying to figure that one out.
I take that back, by the way. You don't have to be black to like the Cosby and Cosby Show in different world.
Well, sure, but that's very clearly what the reference is without mentioning Cosby.
Yeah, we don't want to. That word's not something you want to bring up very much. Just like the Michael Jackson reference in this film. But Hands Across America, for people who don't know, was a charity campaign in 1986 where 6.5 million people approximately held hands for 15 minutes from coast to coast in the United States. But what's important about it for this film is twofold. One, it's the thing that. It's going to be hard for character names, but Little Adelaide at the beginning of the film.
Right.
It's kind of one of her last experiences with the human world. And it's how, because Hands Across America was meant to raise awareness for famine in Africa, but probably more importantly for this, homelessness in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so if it's one of the last things that she's aware of, we're assuming this commercial for Hands Across America, she's probably watching it. Right, that it's on TV in their home.
You can actually see her reflected in the
Yes,
screen.
right. That's right. You see her reflection. And because of how it plays out at the end of the film, it is how she knows to get awareness of something. Right? And when she's a little kid, she's told, oh, if you want people to pay attention to you, one way to do that is Hands Across America.
Yes.
So that becomes very important. But also the fact that it was about that Hands Across America was meant to raise awareness of, specifically, like I said, homelessness in the United States does play into the themes of the film quite a bit. So I think understanding Hands Across America is a very important way to start the film, especially as it kind of plays out at the end of the movie. And then you get into. He said in this first act with this family. Well, then you have the little girl wandering from her family, which will play out later, and kind of just a little bit of dread that you get during that because you're aware you're watching a horror film.
Well, and watching it the second time, did you feel the impact of why he was filming all those people? The first time.
Oh, yeah. The second time, yes.
The first time, he's very clearly just setting the stage of, look at all these strangers, look at how this little girl's wandering off, but then the second time through, you realize that's all set up for later.
Yes. No, it absolutely isn't at all. Again, it's, like I said, the first half hour is the last half hour.
Yes.
So And so then we come, and after the little Adelaide goes into the Hall of Mirrors, and then sees her doppelganger basically disappears. We are introduced, we're introduced to a rabbit.
Yes.
And then a lot of rabbits. And then one of the greatest opening musical score pieces I've heard in a while.
Dude, I need this score to come out on vinyl as soon as possible. I want to listen to it because the opening, all of the music is incredible.
It is.
The opening theme is just mind-melting. But here's a little something that I threw onto this movie that I don't know if it's intentional or whatever. But when they get to the beach and the family is walking across the beach, the music reminded me so much of the Jawas walking across Tatooine.
Okay, yeah, I don't know, but I'd have to think about that part.
Oh my gosh! And I didn't pick it up till the second viewing, but man, just all throughout the music is gorgeous.
It is. It's one of those films that I bought the score while I was watching the credits on my on iTunes. So then we're introduced to Adelaide, Gabe, Zora, and Jason, who are our lead family. One thing that I think is interesting to note about this film coming off of the heels of Get Out is this is not a movie about race. At least not in the clear-cut way that Get Out was.
Yeah, not as overtly. There's certainly moments, though, and we'll get to one in a minute.
Well, what I would say about it, though, is and this goes to, and I think you commented on this quite well in your post, quite bluntly, which I liked, actually, about Jordan Peele's comments about casting black actors in his movies.
Yes.
The film's not necessarily about race, but it is culturally black. The family is culturally black. And,
yes.
And the film is as well, and that's important. I'm going to bring a line real quick from the Oscars, not the last Oscars, but the Oscars before that. America's sweetheart, Kumail Nanjiani, who was up for I love the man, who was up for an Academy Award, against Jordan Peele for screenplay, said this on the Oscars. Some of my favorite movies are movies, and for people who don't know, Kumail Nanjiani is Pakistani. For some of my favorite movies are movies by straight white dudes about straight white dudes. Now straight white dudes can watch movies starring me, and you can relate to that. It's not hard. I've done it my whole life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And you commented on it. By having a black family at the center of this, it does not change the message of the film. It does not change the telling of the film.
And it doesn't change my ability as an old white dude to relate to it.
Absolutely. And we'll get to the scene that I felt was the most relatable, which has to do with that, which is the I Got Five on It scene in the car. The I Got Five on It song, which I find it funny that so much has been made out of the use of the song in the film, trying to figure out what it means. Because if you listen to the song, it's I Got Five on It is a song by the Loonies, formerly known as Looney Tunes, but I think Warner Brothers lawyers had something to say about that. It's just about doing drugs. Wall to wall, that song is about smoking weed, drinking 40s and smoking weed. There's no hidden meaning to it. But what I found very relatable about that scene when they're in the car and I Got Five on It comes on the radio and they're all singing along with it, because it's a classic. Winston Duke has my favorite line where the daughter says it's about drugs, and he says it's not about drugs, it's just a dope song, which I find hysterical because if you put a different emphasis on a word, it's just a dope song.
Right.
I love that. But I can just imagine myself when my girls are older driving along and be like, no, honey, it's not about heroin. Maybe Mr. Brownstone was just a really good dancer. It was such a relatable moment because eventually we have to come to terms with the fact that most of the music we like is about drugs and violence and fucking.
Yeah.
And that songs I play around my kids, like, this band Alice in Chains. No, honey, it's not about smack and killing yourself. It's just all about smack and killing yourself. So I thought that was a very relatable moment with the film, but it also, Loonies were from Oakland, and this is a Northern California family. So I think it's important to kind of place it with that. And then also, there's which also, by the way, continuing from last year, this is like the fourth film in basically the last calendar year plus that it has Oakland as an important part of the film in a way. Black Panther, Sorry to Bother You, and Blind Spotting last year were all Oakland-based films, at least partially. But more than anything, that song is, if you did that in a movie and it was a white family, it might be, as we see later, it might be Good Vibrations.
Sure.
Right? I mean, although, to be fair, I grew up on hip-hop too, but it could be, so I thought, but that was the film, that was the moment where the family kind of came together for me, although I think there's a clue in that scene. But I love the fact that in this first half hour, and real quick for people who've seen it, here's just a list of some of the things he sets up in the first act. Zora runs track and field. Zora asks if she can drive while she's on this trip. One that I saw coming, the flare gun.
Yes.
He's having you see at one point Adelaide picks up a rabbit doll that's been left in the cabin. Jason's closet trick, where he gets locked in the closet.
Yeah.
Hands Across America, clearly. Talking about Josh's new car. Tim Heidecker's new car. The problem with the boat's engine. The problem with its steering. The very opening with the tunnels. And then, like the videotapes and things like that. And there's a whole bunch more things that are all just in there in the first act. Like, that seem organic. They seem like this natural thing. Oh, he just plays this game in this house and he accidentally gets caught in the closet. And you're
none of it comes across as clunky.
No.
It's all integrated into the process of meeting this family and their friends.
Right. But it all comes back.
It all pays off.
It all pays off. He sets it up, he knocks it down. And that comes from, in my opinion, his comedic abilities. They're just setups and punchlines.
Yeah, you're right. Wow.
Set up, punchline. Every once in a while, he comes back to it a third time, kind of as a tag, like you would in a stand-up routine.
Sure.
But it's just setups and punchlines. And that's what I felt Get Out had as well, was a meticulous attention to that structure. Bringing things back. Even the owl in the haunted house.
Yeah. We get it again later.
And we get it again later, which smacks the shit out of him with a baseball bat.
It's so funny because it's not important to the plot whatsoever, but for the audience, it's a little moment of victory because we know that damn owl scared her earlier, and it scared us too.
Yeah, but it didn't scare her earlier.
It
scared someone else earlier.
Well, right, exactly.
Yeah, but we don't know at the time. But So we're introduced to the family, and we know that Adelaide has some kind of, and I think the movie does a good job, barring if you picked up on it at the beginning, the fact that she was traumatized by this thing, and we don't know what this thing was that traumatized her back then, other than seeing someone who looked like her.
Well, it's essentially presented as she, because you can understand little kid trauma, even if nothing happened.
Yes.
It could have had a big effect on her. We all, when we were kids, experienced things that upset us, maybe not to the degree shown in this movie, obviously, but we all went through our own little traumas when we were kids, so you can immediately latch on to the idea that just being separated for 15 minutes could have had some kind of effect, but then also what's so brilliant about it is at the same time, as parents, we see her father saying it was just 15 minutes. What's the big deal? Yeah. And kind of relate to that as well. Because
yes, exactly.
As parents, we've all had those little moments where, like, you look back and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have let that happen. I shouldn't have done that. I should have looked closer when he was on the slide. I should have, but it's okay. It's fine. What's the big deal? Like, you have to rationalize those things because your kids are tough. They're going to grow up. They're going to be fine. But as parents, we have this sort of ongoing battle with guilt and reasonableness.
People who don't have kids, just to let you know, when you do have kids, if you ever do, you don't have to. You don't have to.
Sure.
If you do, you'll learn that your parents didn't know what the fuck they were doing either.
Right. Absolutely. I actually had that conversation with my mom yesterday where you're, and that's the other thing is going forward with your parents, if you're fortunate enough that they're still around when you're a parent, you'll have a lot of conversations about, I guess this is resolved now because I understand.
Yeah. No, there is. You just go like, oh, they were just making this up too.
Right.
And they had no idea when they did that thing. They didn't know what they were doing. No, they were, they made mistakes.
Were just trying.
You're just trying your best to make it. Just trying your best, as Chris Rock said, to keep you off the pole. And
real quick, one thing, since we're still talking about kind of the opening of the movie, I didn't write about it because I just couldn't. The written word sometimes is not appropriate for. You just can't get something out. The conversation between Adelaide and I can't remember Kitty,
yeah,
on the beach,
played by the great Elizabeth Moss,
she's fantastic in this. But that conversation
perfectly named
is so perfect because it's weird. And the first time around, I wasn't even sure if they knew each other.
Right.
The second viewing, I realized that they're family friends, but there's a certain relatability that just doesn't kick in sometimes. And I think it's the awkwardness of interracial relationships that can happen.
Yes. No, I think that plays part of it, and that comes from the cultural aspect, right? It's just they don't have the same touchstones necessarily.
Yes.
You know, their lives are pretty similar. And I think the true friendship, of course, lies in their husbands.
Yeah.
I don't think they would be hanging out if it weren't for their husbands hanging out together. And so that plays into that. But even then, you know, it is interesting to see that scene, you know, but we're also watching Lupita in that first half hour be a good mother and maybe a little too overprotective, and we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
But she's also very distant. But the first time around that scene, however, you do kind of excuse it because you know she does not want to be at this beach.
Right.
Because last time she was here, we don't know what happened entirely, but something happened. Right?
And sometimes it doesn't take much to make you not want to revisit, you know, anything. So again, it's very relatable.
I haven't had tequila in 15 years. So you're right. And so we established the family, and we have that great scene in the car where they're singing along. I'd like to point out for a later point that Jason doesn't seem to be able to keep on rhythm. We'll get to that later.
Interesting. Okay.
For that point. So then we get to, and then let's skip ahead. Then their evil fucking doppelgangers show up. Cutting to the chase.
Right.
And what I think is the most terrifying sequence of the movie, the moment in the movie, see, the first time I saw it with my buddy Aaron, and there were like 5 people there because we saw it at noon the day it opened.
Well, let me tell you real quick about my experience the first time that I saw the movie. I did see it during the day, and I was the only white person in a theater almost half full, maybe a little more than half full, of black folks.
Awesome.
And it made it an experience for me because prior to the movie, you know how you get the commercials and stuff? I was very, very cognizant of how many white people were in those commercials.
Yeah.
Or the lack of people of color in those commercials. And
that's awesome.
It was perfect, and it was an interesting experience sitting there going, man, this is how people live every day.
You see, my friend,
we don't experience it.
No, I see. My friend Aaron is African American, and he's a fan of Peele, except for he will probably hate him to the day he dies because of Aaron, which is apparently a joke from Key and Peele, where people call people named Aaron Aaron, and because the extra A, and so that's the one other thing I know about Key and Peele, and he's not a fan of that. But then when I went and saw it the second time, I went to theater down the street from me does Tuesday night cheap movies, like $7 no matter all day, and so I went saw it a month after it came out in a packed crowd after seeing it the first time with only 5 people.
Nice.
And it was a very different experience. And the moment when, I think it's Zora says there's a family in the driveway, it's either Zora or Jason says it, that there's a family in the driveway, or there are people in the driveway, the whole audience, that's when the whole audience started to freak out.
Yeah.
Not before they even saw them. It was the line. Just out of nowhere, this movie, there's a family in the driveway. And everyone was like, oh, shit.
Well, and it's so creepy because if you have seen the trailer, you're aware that this is the central issue of the movie. But two, it's nighttime. They're all in bed or getting ready to go to bed, so it's late. So why is a whole family... Like, there's a man in the driveway wouldn't have been quite as creepy.
No. The for some reason, you're right, the word family.
Yes.
Why the word family really... Yeah, it's really creepy. And so then we're catered to what I think is a simultaneously funny and frightening scene with Winston Duke carrying a bulk of the work, playing the dad that, isn't a guy, but his family is in danger, and so he's going to do his best to be a tough guy, right?
Yes.
Again, something that I really related to as someone who would really have no idea how to handle himself in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
But as you know, as a father, when you put your family on the line, you do what you got to do. So
well, I don't know if you're keeping up with The Gifted at all.
No.
I really enjoy it as I think the best adaptation of X-Men, but there is a big, powerful dad moment in that much like Winston Duke and Us, like you see yourself in these things now, and you wonder, like, well, what would I be doing? And yeah, probably about what Winston Duke does.
Yeah, trying but not doing it very well.
Right.
So eventually they get into the house, and
it's brutal how they do, because it get the scene where Abraham yanks the bat away from Winston through the door.
Yeah,
made me gasp.
And that's very movie monster. That's a very movie monster moment.
It absolutely is. But he lost, like, that early in the movie. He lost already because the only thing he had, that bat, was all he had.
Yes.
And it's gone.
Yeah. No, and it disappears out the door almost magically, like it was snagged by a monster. And it's important to remember, it's not a monster; it's a human being.
Right.
That's important to remember. But in that moment, it feels like a monster. And she tells Zora to get her shoes on in case she's got to go run.
Yes.
Which I thought was great. Again, where we're setting it up and knocking it down. And then we get the scene where my audience did not know how to react to it the second time around, especially, which was Red's speech when she sits the family down. We're introduced to the evil doppelgangers, Red, Abraham, Umbre, and Pluto. And when Lupita starts talking, now there's been a little controversy about the way she speaks in this movie, about how Red speaks, because some people thinking she's using something called spasmodic symphona, which is a real condition.
Oh, interesting.
Now, I'm never going to argue with someone who suffers from the condition. I don't understand. I don't know their struggle. I don't want to do anything to diminish it, but there's been a little controversy about it. What it came across to me, and what the movie bears out, is that it came across to me as someone who hasn't spoken much in 30 years.
That's how I took it.
That she hasn't used her voice in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's effective. So for people who thought were personally offended by it, again, I'm not going to argue with them about it. But for me, it was very effective. But my audience didn't know how to feel. My audience kind of laughed.
There were a few moments where the audiences that I saw it with laughed, where I was horrified. And I get it. I can see it. I can see... Honestly, I think there are a couple of points where what we're seeing is so uncomfortable that our reaction is to laugh.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the tethered, all of the tethered, the way that they vocalize it's a very fine line between funny and horrifying, especially Tim Heidecker.
Yes, and I think later it's supposed to be funny.
With Heidecker,
it's supposed to be funny.
See...
Because it's not that far off from how that fucking dude talked when he wasn't. The real version talked.
And that's the thing, is we see his tethered, which I don't, technically I don't know that we got names for much of
the only one I have is Kitties.
Okay.
Because there's actually a little joke in there. But
okay. But his tethered is aping how it's been forced to behave for the past, 40 years or whatever. Right. So it is, while its intent is to murder Shit, what's the dad's name? Gabe.
Gabe.
While its intent is to murder him, all it knows is this behavior of this goofy asshole.
I mean, it's a bro zombie. It's such a
Right.
You're right. I absolutely love the fact that his doppelganger's still a douchebag.
But it is, well, when he does the psych, when Kitty's on the ground dying, and he reaches down.
Oh, so good.
But it's yes, it's funny, but at the same time, it's horrifying and is absolutely the point of the movie.
So we get back to when we meet them real quick, and I think the most important line in that scene, Red gives this little speech about a girl with a shadow and how, while the girl had good things in life, the shadow had bad things in life, to sum it up,
Right.
And if you watch earlier in the film, there's a moment where Lupita eats a strawberry at the house.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of a scene in, it was either an episode of Firefly or in the movie, I think it was in the pilot of Firefly, where Kaylee eats a strawberry, and in the realm of Firefly, fresh fruit is just not a thing.
Right.
The way Lupita eats the strawberry, it looks like a woman who grew up eating raw rabbit.
Sure.
And hasn't forgotten what it tastes like.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well,
it was just a really subtle moment, but she dove into that strawberry.
Well,
it's such a strong taste.
What's interesting, and this is what I noticed that second time, is the rest of the family is eating some kind of crappy fast food.
Yeah.
And she's sitting there eating strawberries.
Yeah. But the most important line in this scene by far is when Gabe asks, "Who are you people?" And what does Red say?
We are Americans.
We are Americans. Now, this works on a lot of levels. The surface level works on hands across America.
Sure.
They're Americans, and they're going to put their hands across America. That is part of it. It's also going to the themes of the film that we'll sum up when we get to it, the idea that they're not recognizable as Americans to your average American family, to your average American person doesn't recognize them as American.
Yes.
I think is very weighted. But they didn't say, we're you. We didn't say, we're your shadows. They didn't say anything like that. That was already kind of out there.
Yeah.
We're Americans. That's very important. Jordan Peele is telling a film. He is an African American. So while there are themes in the film that apply worldwide, themes of class, themes of poverty, systemic poverty, things like that, those things can apply worldwide. He's telling a specifically American tale, and I think that's important.
Well, to the point where I took it as this phenomenon of the tethered is specifically an American thing.
Yeah, and that's quite possible.
This isn't happening all over the world.
Yes, and as we find out later, it was created by the government, some kind of system, some kind of program.
Here's the thing, is the real Adelaide's speculation later on, because she very specifically says, "I think."
Yes.
So we as the audience we are left to take that or not.
So then we have the sequence where basically all the doppelgangers and their our normal, we'll say, counterparts split up basically into pairs, right? Where Gabe and Abraham go to beat the shit out of each other in a very something. What was it reminded me of? It was awesome, but what's the Friday the 13th 7 where there's a lot having to do with the lake. I don't know, the one with the psychic abilities. But anyway, it reminded me a little bit of that. Jason goes off with Pluto to play. Zara runs from Umbre, her doppelganger.
Which, by the way, means the darkest part of the shadow.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And she was definitely the darkest one. And then Red sits around with Adelaide. Now, I don't want to, since we don't have a ton of time, I don't want to blow through every beat of that. But as someone who enjoys horror films, did you find all that stuff tense and scary? I'm getting up to the point where they're reunited. There's 4 different sequences that go on and culminate with them being reunited as a family.
To me, I felt like Jordan Peele was playing with the idea of horror movies, and he was giving us several different horror tropes at the same time, very consciously. And he did them all effectively, but at that point I was like, this is really weird, because I feel like this stuff should be happening in the last half hour of the movie,
Yes, you're right. That's what I was at. Yeah.
We're already to it. So while everything was shot and scripted and paced very, very effectively, as it would have been in a standard horror movie, I knew, again, this is my movie brain kicking in, I knew where we were in the movie, so I knew there wasn't going to be, it was possible that Gabe would die.
That was the only one I was fearful for.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. By the way, I love that he didn't.
Oh, I love that at the end the family is together, or the family such as we have known them anyway.
Yeah. In one way. But yeah, I was just wondering, because that sequence, I don't think there's much to talk about as much thematically, just
no. It's a tribute to horror movies. That's all that sequence is, because it's what we as the audience expected. We just didn't expect it so soon.
And it pays off some of those things. It pays off the closet. It pays off Jason's magic trick. It pays off her running, right? It brings a lot of the things that we brought into it early. So then they're reunited, and then here's the part I think that took you. Then we cut to Kitty and Jason. After the family defeats their doppelgangers, kills one of them, and then get away in Crawdaddy, Gabe's boat.
Yes.
Which is awesome. Then we cut to Kitty and Jason in their house. The white couple who seems to have it all, or who seems to be a step ahead on Gabe and Adelaide as far as, his boat's nicer, his car's nicer, their house is bigger. And we're met, and if we didn't know ahead of time, we discovered that Jason truly is a douchebag. Josh. Josh truly is a douchebag. When his wife comes down and asks him if there's something scary out in the woods, the scariest thing he can come up with for his blonde, white wife is OJ.
Right.
Thought that was a nice little telling
which
joke.
I don't know how timely that really was, but I get it. I get what they were doing there.
He's been in the news a lot more lately because there was the miniseries and the documentary, and now he's out of prison again. So it felt appropriate to me, but just the idea that that would be the scariest thing this douchebag could come up with would be OJ.
Yeah.
And then we get one of my favorite musical moments in the movie where he has it play the Beach Boys, which hit their version of Siri or of Alexa. I don't remember what they called it. Has him play some Beach Boys, and I'm a Beach Boys fan, but they could not be any whiter.
Yeah, and that was very clearly the intent there.
Yeah.
What's the whitest music on the planet?
Right. And then they come in, and we find out, which we did not realize, was that everyone has a doppelganger. It's not just our Mealy family.
And see, to me, that was the big shock of the movie. That was the big. I won't even call it a twist, because all it is it's just the plot unfolding. But because I fully expected the doppelgangers to show up at Josh and Kitty's house and kill them. I didn't think there were going to be Josh and Kitty doppelgangers.
Right, and it helps explain why that previous sequence we had with the family, the escape, and why it felt like it was happening too early.
Yes, that there was so much more
that's not the whole movie
to go. And also, there's a moment on the boat where Abraham has Gabe, in the big garbage bag or whatever, and you hear something from the shore. You hear one of the tethered from the shore
grunting. Yeah,
that it's obviously not Red. It can't be either one of the kids. They don't sound like that. But again, you're in the thick of it. You immediately cut to, Gabe tearing through the little hole in the garbage bag, so you don't have a whole lot of time to think about it, but you realize that Abraham was communicating with the Josh doppelganger at that point.
Yeah, the second time through, I totally picked that up.
Right, the first time it was just kind of odd, but you're so caught up in events, you don't have time to consider it. So
Kitty and her husband and her family and her two twin daughters, which I saw the girls in the opening credits. I go, creepy twins.
Yeah, absolutely.
All get murdered by their doppelgangers, and then our lead family show up in the Crawdaddy to come get help. And this is probably my favorite sequence in the movie. One, you have Elizabeth Moss, who's on the ground dying, crawling towards the husband that she very much would like to kill herself, but crawling towards him, calling for help in what is a cheap joke, but one that made me laugh either way, when she asks Alexa to call the police.
Call the police, yes.
And instead, it plays "Fuck the Police" by NWA. This works in a couple of ways. One, the Black family shows up. It's got to have NWA as a soundtrack, not the Beach Boys.
Right.
Two, the police are non-existent in this movie.
Right. We are told that they're going to be there in 14 minutes. And 14 minutes later...
They are 14 minutes away the entire movie.
Yes.
And there's something to be said about that.
For sure.
For children of the 90s, 911 is a joke, I believe a wise man once said.
Yes.
And
911 is a joke in your town.
In your town. Right, exactly. Yeah. So I like the fact that there's that, but it also gives as someone who grew up also listening to, NWA and West Coast gangster rap, it also gave a proper soundtrack for the scene that follows, where the family who just, they know what's going on. They know there's tough shit going on. The kids, I love the kids in this scene. I love the fact that dad lures away the douchebag away from the thing to the boat. The mom gets kidnapped. And so in order to save the mom, the kids go in.
Which, by the way, when they yank her in the door... Yeah. That is the most Scooby-Doo fucking scene
it was,
in the entire movie. I loved it, but it was so absurd.
But I love Zora and Jason coming in, moving slow. Zora's got the, what does she have? She's got a golf club. She's got the putter. And Jason's got some kind of meteorite.
A geode.
Thing. Yeah, some kind of
a geode on a stick.
Right. But I love how they come in and they're like, well, I guess we got to go save mom.
Yeah.
and the look and listen, Zora gets a little thrill out of beating the shit out of those twins. Let's not lie.
Oh
yeah. But I think that scene is insanely clever. And again, by having the NWA on the soundtrack, it's just more than anything, it's just a funny gag of changing the soundtrack before the Black family shows up. They're able to defeat the evil doppelgangers this time, kill all of them. And then the music, kind of.
Yeah. Because we have a very important scene to get to after.
Right. But then what we have that is interesting, though, is we have a moment where it chills out, where what song comes back on the radio? I Got Five on It. They play again. I Got Five on It comes back on. And that is the song that is the song playing when you see the family in the car earlier that they're all jamming to. And so the story, their story or their dynamic kind of comes full circle, and they're now a coherent team for the rest of the film. And they're the family, and the family is kind of, it almost feels like they're out of danger at that moment. Yeah. Right?
It really does.
There's chilling back, listening to a classic song about getting high.
You know that Red, Umbra, and Pluto are still out there.
Right.
But you really don't know, well, wait, how is this all going to come back together? What is our ending going to be?
Right.
And we go into the TV footage.
Then they turn on the TV.
Now all of a sudden it's almost Night of the Living Dead.
And here's where the movie kind of takes on this grander idea. I mean, we've gotten a glimpse of it being bigger because of having Kitty and Josh doubles. But now the idea that it's happening all over.
Right.
And this is where the film kind of, like I said, what Get Out is about is a little more cut and dry. But we might as well get into it real quick with what the tethered are. The tethered, according to the film, or at least according to Red, right there, they're duplicates made of that. Everyone above has a duplicate below that is tethered to them. According to Red, they were created as a government experiment to try to control people.
Which is obviously a, I guess, metaphor for the ghetto.
Yeah, and for a lot of things, and that they were, but that when they were created, they were only created. It turns out that they could recreate the body, but that they split the soul with the person.
Well, I don't think they split it. They just the tethered simply didn't have souls.
Well, they actually say in it, she actually said they shared a soul. But I do think the people above get the lion's share of it. Would be at the very least. I did find that line to be a little weird when he said shared the soul, but that they have these, that everyone has this thing below that is a mirror of themselves, and that the government eventually, or whoever did this, abandoned them, which I think is important. It is a problem created by the system then ignored.
Yes.
Which, if you look at the opening with Hands Across America, can we, the people that are ignored in society, the homeless, the poor, people that we ignore in this society that are, I'd say, at least from Peele's point of view, created by the system, that the system it helps create these people that are forgotten, that are not without soul in our world, of course, but that are viewed as less than.
Well, that don't have the what the rest of us have. They don't get to sit down and watch TV all the time. They don't get the comforts that your average American enjoys. That it's very much about the haves and the have-nots,
or what we think of as the average American, at the very least. Because the word that comes to my mind, and it's a word that's a very hot button word the past couple of years, but I think if I had to boil the movie down to one word it's about, I would say the word is privilege. That the idea of that her speech about the shadow is all about privilege. It's all about these people, that while you were eating great food, and I keep coming back to this image because it's disgusting, raw, bloody rabbit.
Right.
They're eating scraps. They're doing whatever they can do to survive. So to me, the tethered are just a metaphor for that's why the film feels to me more to be about class.
Yeah.
And about privilege, and about the systems that keep people down, that create poverty, and that when people are no longer of a use to those systems, that they're just abandoned.
Well, and it's to break it down very simply, the idea is that I grew up with working parents.
Yes.
Who wanted me to be educated, who wanted me to live a certain life, who wanted me to have certain benefits, and who were capable of giving me those benefits. If I had grown up in an entirely different situation without access to the luxury that I enjoyed, without access to the possibility of certain types of schooling or certain even just basic comforts, without the USS flag, even something as ridiculous as that, I would be an entirely different person, and society would look at me in an entirely different way, regardless of the color of my skin.
Right, and that's privilege. Right. I mean, it's really what that is. And,
yes.
and the reason they look like, the reason they're doppelgangers is because they're us. They're Americans. And also, it could be any one of us, given the circumstances.
And the movie makes this point by the supposed twist that Adelaide is one of the tethered, and that she got out of the oppressive situation that she was in, and is one of us now.
And I see that as actually more of a negative, in a way. When we get to that, the idea that she's turned her back on her people. Because she's found out, what's cool about privilege? Everything.
Well, to me, the negative about it is and it's brought up very specifically, you could have taken me with you.
That as well, yes.
It's not that leaving the oppressive situation is a bad thing. It's that leaving it and not doing anything about those that you left behind.
Right.
Because here's my issue with the word privilege, is it's often used as a pejorative term. Right. I want everybody to enjoy what I enjoy.
Yes.
I don't think it's right to look down on somebody who has enjoyed privilege. I think it's right to want to raise everybody up.
When people use privilege, they're more talking. They're talking about the problem with privilege comes with a lack of awareness.
Right.
Right. Is not knowing that you've been helped by these things.
And that's definitely been part of my sort of personal growth over the last several years is sort of recognizing like, oh, I did have advantages, and whether or not I feel a certain way about having those advantages, there's no denying that my life is different because of it. Right.
And so, I mean, I just think it's important to keep that in mind, that you're right. It's a very haves or have-nots. It's a very, I'm not surprised, I'm a fan of our former president. But Barack Obama got famous in 2006 with a speech about how there are not two Americas. And I think this movie is saying otherwise. I think this movie is very clearly stating that there are two Americas. And they're maybe not the two Americas that the news is telling us that there are. Maybe it's maybe PLC is a different divide than red and blue or, conservative or liberal. I think PLC is a different thing that divides this country. And so I just think that's interesting. Now, these people, you would think that they would be sympathetic because they are people that are downtrodden, because if they are standing in for people that are poor, that are hungry, that are homeless, that they would be more sympathetic to them. But in the movie, they're the monsters.
Well,
right?
But I think that's where the movie is challenging you, is you have to consider them and understand that they're monsters, but it's not of their own doing.
Yep.
And that they're not, we started off this conversation by saying her evil double. They're not evil. Their situation, their circumstance of living is what has made them how they are. And how they are isn't evil. It's just a product of what they've been forced to endure.
Well, we know we're dealing with a horror director who knows his classics.
Yes.
So you have to ask, who's the real villain? The monster or Victor Frankenstein? And that's what it kind of comes down to.
And
right?
That's the thing is really nobody... we have two villains in this movie, in my opinion.
Right.
We have Adelaide,
yep,
who just ran and sacrificed this other human in order for her life to be better and left her people behind. And we have whoever is responsible for the tethered, which is very real because as Americans, it's really hard to point a finger at who's responsible for the shit we're in right now. Like, granted, yes, there's a figurehead that everybody can throw stones at, deservedly so, but it's not... Donald Trump isn't the reason we're where we're at. He isn't helping, but
no, he's not helping.
It goes back so much further, and it's you just shake your fist at what?
Well, it's one of the big questions of what happens when it's the system,
right?
Who do you point your fingers at when it's the system that does this,
right?
When people talk about anything right now, we'll use racism as an example, even though I don't think that's what this film is about. Being racist, not liking someone of a different race, I don't care. You can do that. That's fine. I'm not probably going to be friends with you. That's fine. The problem is in the system, is systemic racism.
Yes.
The problem is systemic sexism. All the other things will fall into place afterwards, but the things that are holding people down, you can't point to one person. You have 200 and almost 50, because we're old, years of history that have created this. It reminded me a little bit, in their revolution, which is kind of what it is, right? They're kind of uprising.
Oh, absolutely.
It reminded me a little bit of the French Revolution. I remember a few years ago I was in Paris with my wife on vacation, and we went to Versailles, the famous palace of Marie Antoinette and Louis and stuff. And I looked around Versailles, and it is amazing, right? It's gorgeous. It's huge. The gardens are beautiful. It's got these orange groves in a place where it cannot grow oranges, but they spend so much water just to make them grow there. It's got like 5 different homes that like the king would go to, like his third home because the second home was getting too busy. Marie Antoinette built her own little replica of an Austrian village there to remind her home so she could go play house, basically. And I looked around this place, and I said, this place is amazing, and I would have cut their fucking heads off too.
Yeah.
And that's what this felt like to me, was their methods in this. The others' methods are not something I can necessarily get behind. At least as they were. They're violent, but at a certain point, when do you tell people to, and this is something that I think applies to real life, when do you tell people to stop being patient?
Right.
And change? This is their lives now, and so I thought, so I think the tethered can be a metaphor for a lot of different things, and they can also just be, and this is what I really like in film, they can also just be kind of scary movie monsters. Like if you choose to just take it as it is, there's still this creepy sci-fi idea.
And that's the thing, is that I obviously this engaged both of our brains quite well.
Yeah.
But also it works at face value.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed, was I genuinely enjoyed the film. And that's an important thing to say as we talk about things, these different things. I genuinely enjoyed the movie itself. I found it constantly entertaining. I really liked the characters. As someone who doesn't tend to get scared by horror movies, I wasn't jumping out of my seat, but I was creeped out plenty of times. I was tense plenty of times.
Well, I enjoyed its overall presentation of horror. There weren't many times where I was really... there weren't any jump scares, really. There weren't...
The owl at the beginning might be the big one.
Yeah, right. And that was fun, and that was cool, and that was another point where you realize Peele knows his shit. He knows what that owl would sound like if Merlin's Woods were a real thing.
See, one of my biggest fears is looking towards, is sitting in my couch or whatever, and looking at the window, and there be someone standing there. Sure. That's one of the scary, just looking at me. That's one of the scariest, images to me. If I was to turn around now and look at my window and there was, I'm a floor up, so that would be real scary. But, so the images of them in the driveway, of these people just appearing at your house, that stuff really creeped me out. That stuff got under my skin a little bit.
And I think
that
kind of fear is a lot of where my problem with Gray Aliens comes from, is because they're so often depicted as being much more in your proximity than they should be. Right. That's sort of looking in the window, standing over your bed. That's a very specific kind of dread.
Yeah, like the Gentleman in Hush, the Buffy episode.
Right. That sort of. Yeah. So
I know we don't have a ton of time, so let's blast through this now.
Yeah.
So we get the family gets back together, and they play I Got Five on It. They bring that back as kind of a symbol of the family kind of reuniting and chilling out. And we find this happening, and then they go, for some reason that I don't quite understand, they drive back to the beach.
Well, there's a very significant scene prior to that. They leave. They get Josh's new car, which is a little moment of morbid family humor.
Yes.
And Adelaide has to go back in to get the key, and she finds one of the twins is still alive.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
She has to take care of business, and Jason walks in just as she's finishing her off. And this is the first cue we see that gives us wait a minute, that's right. At the beginning, I was pretty convinced we saw a switch, and she's making noises that are quite reminiscent of all of the Tethered.
She'll make a few of them even more clearly later.
Yes, absolutely. But that moment there, Jason sees it, and we are shown he takes note of it.
He does. And so do we. And like I said, I had forgotten about the beginning, but it does, the second time through, it definitely popped out at me. Yeah. It definitely popped out. And so they get in the car, and I love the little moment where Zora wants to drive. Again, that was set up in the first 10 minutes where she asked if she could drive.
Yes.
And she says and I like the morbid humor where she says she has the highest kill count, and they get into a little argument over who's killed the most of them, which I really enjoyed. Again, almost, these are kids growing up on video games, what's their kill streak on Call of Duty? It was very much no, I have the highest kill count. It was such a video game phrase. And then there's ones where they run into what's her name? Umbra, right? And take her out. And here's our second clue, I think, is when she finally jettisons Umbra from the car, and Umbra, whatever, and Adelaide goes to check on her, and she's dying, right? She's clearly dying. Her back is
broken in half.
Yeah. But Adelaide approaches her with sympathy and with a mother's empathy and a mother's caring. And while on first view, that made total sense to me. She's watching a girl who looks like her daughter die. And so as a mother, she would want to comfort her. That makes sense on first viewing. It holds up. On the second viewing, it takes on a whole nother meaning when you know that she is one of them.
Yes.
Right? She came from the same place. So then they go back to the beach, right? They go back to Santa Cruz Pier, basically.
And not in the way that Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello did.
No, they do not.
If I could make the whitest possible reference.
And the bird is clearly not the word. So they get there. Kids, ask your parents, or maybe your parents' parents at this age. I don't know.
And speaking of the beach, they get there, and we move past it because we got to move past a lot of stuff. But real quick, I've got to say, the second time through, the guy standing on the beach that Jason sees, I didn't even realize the first time what was up with that. But he was the first of the tethered that we saw forming the line.
Yes.
And
he was the beginning of the line.
Didn't even, the first time you don't know what's going on.
I didn't get that till you just mentioned it. So
he's standing there with his hands out, waiting, because you realize he's got the red jumpsuit, and he has murdered his duplicate because that's who we see getting loaded into the ambulance as the family arrives at the beach. The
Jeremiah 11:11 guy.
Yes.
Just real quick, you probably know the Bible better than I do, but I looked up not Jeremiah. Is Isaiah 11:11?
No, it's Jeremiah.
It's Jeremiah
11:11. I can't recite it off the top of my head. But it's about taking care of.
It's about the covenant between. The exact quote is from King James. Thus the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry to me, I will not hearken unto them.
Oh, okay.
It's about God threatening. It's about God threatening punishment on the house of Israel for breaking their covenant. So this could be about us failing our fellow man.
Yeah.
Covenant between the people and the tethered, or as the prophet Jules of Inglewood once said, it's just some cold-blooded shit to say to a motherfucker before you pop a cap in their ass. It's one of those things. But you're right. We do see that, and then we come back to the beach, and we are confronted by one. We see that the tethered have definitely been doing some work.
Yes,
and taking people out, and that they are also forming this line, holding hands, that is oddly reminiscent of Hands Across America.
The red figures of the advertisement.
Yes, very specific on the logos on the shirts for Hands Across America. They were red, and then they are confronted by Pluto, who I'm not 100% sure I get why sometimes Pluto has to mimic Jason and sometimes he doesn't.
Well, it's interesting. There seems to be focus involved, and that's something we do have to cover real quick, because we have to wonder why young Adelaide, and this is another part of the statement of the film, young Adelaide, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she get out? How couldn't, because at some point she got out of the golden handcuffs.
At some point, yeah, but remember, she was unconscious when they brought her.
Well, she didn't know the way out, and I feel like the movie did a good job of showing, one, that it took a lot to get down there, and two, that the Adelaide we'd been watching she got down there with ease.
Yes.
Which was very important to note.
It is very important.
But also I do wonder if the place itself is oppressive, and just the act of escaping from that oppressive environment allowed the Adelaide that we know, it's hard to distinguish verbally here. But it allowed her, once she was out of that impressive environment, she could flourish.
Yes.
So is there something about that environment?
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there too.
I mean, there's a little Stockholm syndrome. Obviously, there's also I think she's so young. How she doesn't have the wherewithal to get out. She's probably changed it for a while. So I agree with you. It's a little bit, but
I think there is a bit of will involved with that, and as we see later on, when Adelaide and Red have to mimic each other's dancing.
Yes.
And I think Jason recognizes that when he wills it, because we first see it in the closet when he wants to distract Pluto with that trick.
Yes.
When he learns he can make him raise his hand up. He can make him take his mask off.
It's set up quite well. It's not that it's not set up. It's just
there are questions.
Yeah, there's some questions, but I love the scene. I love the idea of him backing up into the fire. It's a really dramatic scene. It's also, again, another sign where Adelaide is watching Jason backing into the fire
and doesn't want it.
It doesn't want that to happen. And again, on first viewing, you look at that and say, well, yeah, again, it's a boy that looks like her son. And even if not, she's a mother or she's a human being watching a little boy burn. She doesn't want that.
On the second viewing, you know that at this point, Adelaide knows what she went through and knows that these could be just people given the opportunity, and instead they're dying.
And I think it might mean something else, and I'll throw that at you real fast. Real fast at the end. So then Jason gets kidnapped by Red. For some reason, Zora and Gabe decide not to help. And right now, and at this point, Adelaide is in true like Ellen Ripley mode.
Yes.
Right? Where she has her fire poker.
Yeah.
I believe, isn't a fire poker used as a weapon in Get Out too? Trying to remember.
Yeah, I think so.
Does he kill Kathleen Keener with one or something? I don't remember.
I don't know. But I need to watch it again,
yeah.
Especially after loving this so much. Yeah. I need to revisit it.
So then we get into the finale where Adelaide follows Red and ostensibly Jason as well back into the Hall of Mirrors and down a giant escalator
and way down. And
and it takes a long time. Yes. The movie takes its time.
Well, and that's the thing is that we all know how movies work. So the fact that the movie spent that long with it means it was probably at least twice as long as what we saw.
He wants us to know it's a long way down.
Yes.
Which, again, take what you will from that, but he wants you to know it's a long way down. And so then we get to Adelaide. We get Red's little speech at the while she's making which I thought was a little. Not a problem with it. I thought it was a little oversimplified or a little cliched. To have her making paper dolls was a little on the nose, I thought. But she was a kid in this classroom, probably.
Well, and the thing is, everything she's about is about putting on a show, about displays, about symbolism. So, it really does make sense that she'd be sitting there making these paper dolls in order to turn around and cut them with the scissors.
Well, she's setting up a show. That's for sure. She's making dramatic entrance here.
So it works.
Yeah. And so then we have the revelation that Red basically tells us her story of why she came up with the idea for the revolution. We learn that it came from Hands Across America, and then we also learned that the moment she became the leader of the Untethered was when she was basically tethered to Adelaide while she had a dance recital.
Right.
Now, what's important about this is if you go back to the beginning when Adelaide's parents are talking to the psychiatrist, and she's not talking, we know, in retrospect that it's the little girl, the untethered girl, but that she's not talking. The doctor says, find ways for her to express herself, writing, art, or dancing.
Ways to give her a voice.
Ways for her to tell her story, she specifically says. So I believe that scene, because it took me a while to unpack the dancing, is that when that happened up above, the little girl, the untethered little girl, is telling the story of the untethered in her dance somehow. She's telling the story of her life.
Yeah.
And that it's being mimicked in a grotesque way, slightly, but it's being mimicked down below by, who will become Red. And that by telling their story, by being this, that she just showed herself to not be like the others. And that's how she kind of becomes their leader and prophet. But I think there's something very important with the idea that she is using, that the doctor says, use dance to tell her story. And so I think that's very important. And then we come into the sequence that where we have, I thought, a very clever kind of fun fight scene where Red is just always a step ahead of Adelaide while Adelaide's trying to kill her.
Yeah.
Cross-cut to the dance.
And let me just say, Lupita Nyong'o's frustration is just incredible in that scene.
The only problem I had with that scene is I felt like it had the opportunity to be a really good oneer, like a Daredevil old boy style oneer.
Oh yeah.
But it looked like some of it was shot that way, but it kept cutting to the dance, And that sometimes I was a little frustrated because I was like, oh no, but this little dance you're doing in real life with the knife is really cool, you know?
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you. That scene was a little. We get it.
He's going for something. I just don't 100% know if it reads.
Yeah.
So then finally, Adelaide kills Red, and she stabs her through the heart with a poker. But that's not enough.
No.
She takes the chains, which, if we will learn in a second, the handcuffs actually have a very specific meaning.
Yes.
And she cracks her neck.
Right? I mean, very, very deliberately and slowly wraps those chains around her neck and
she wants
pushes.
to make sure this woman is dead.
Correct.
And then what does she do after she cracks her neck?
Wait, did she laugh or did she scream?
She screams a guttural scream that sounds just like the Untethered.
Yes.
All of a sudden, her roots come out. Her crazy comes out.
Yeah.
She just, all of a sudden, she becomes one of them. And it lasts for a good amount of time. And she does, I think, laugh a little bit. Much like we saw, we missed it, Elizabeth Moss kind of laughing earlier when her husband's killed. Right?
Which, by the way, that was creepy as fuck, too.
Yeah, that scene was, crazy. And then, so then she kills her. We see this moment where she basically, but again, if you don't know the twist, you can read that as her just going feral.
Sure.
Right? Like, this is Mama Bear looking for her cub. Fuck off. She's gone nuts.
And look what it takes to turn her into an animal like them.
Right,
like, you could read it as that.
Absolutely. So that she rescues Jason, and she says something, finds Jason hiding in something, of course. And we forgot to mention, Jason's always wearing a mask. He's got this little mask that he wears.
He's in a locker, and he has seen all of this.
And he has seen all of this. And Jason's kind of scared. He doesn't know what's going on. But she says something very important. She says, don't worry, things are going to go back to the way they were.
Which is crazy as shit.
Which is ridiculous. Because no, they're not. And second, I think that's important as well, about talking about that message of her having gotten out and her wanting to hold on to this life she has found.
Right.
That is better than the life she came from. And so she's deluding herself by saying it, but she's like, no, things are going to go back to the way they were because I liked the way they were.
Yeah.
So then, but she manages to kind of snap out of her feral state, but obviously Jason is disturbed by it. We reunited with the family, who the other two just chilling at the ambulance, assuming they're going to come back. And then they take off, and we have a scene in the car, kind of the happy family at the end.
I was very entertained by how much Winston Duke is selling that leg that has nothing visibly wrong with it, but we have to have the reason. Once. Right. We have to have the reason why Gabe isn't doing anything.
Well, he isn't driving. He isn't running.
Right. He's doing nothing. So we every time we see him, he is like limping like nobody you've ever seen limp before.
His fighting method is to slowly draw one of the people away from the fight.
Yes.
And hit him with an ineffectual flare gun, which I really liked.
That was a good moment.
So then we're left with the family in the car, and Adelaide, despite being stabbed at one point, is driving. And we, everything's no, not everything's going to be okay, but our family is okay. And then there's a look, and then we get a close up of Adelaide, and then we get the flashback.
Yeah,
in which we discover that Adelaide is Red, and Red is Adelaide. That 30 plus years ago, the little girl that she met in the thing knocked her out, dragged her back to where the Untethered lived, changed clothes with her, even put her Michael Jackson Thriller shirt right side out. As the little girl, the tethered girl's was inside out, and takes her place. And that all this time, that the Adelaide that we know has been this untethered girl who's been living in the real world for 30 years, and left the real Adelaide to suffer with her people, and that's the one she just killed. And again, you could be ahead of this, you could be behind, it could be a total shock to you, you could be ahead of it. I think it's effective either way.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you get her and Jason exchanging a look. And there's a lot going on in that look. And then Jason puts his mask on.
Yeah.
Then Jason puts his mask on, and just kind of averts his eyes and goes back to his day, and goes back to the car driving. And then we come out of the car. Our story with the family is done, and then we look up, and then we get this final giant tracking shot where we show hands across America.
Thousands
of people. I'm guessing about 6.5 million.
Right.
Holding hands from coast to coast. Where this was Red's plan all along. All she knew, the last thing she knew before she disappeared was the way you get attention for the people that are unbothered or unnoticed, the people that are forgotten.
The underrepresented.
The underrepresented, right, is to make a giant display. And the only giant display she knows from when she was a kid was hands across America.
Well, and what I didn't really notice my first time through, because I was just trying to take everything in, but we get this beautiful tracking shot across the purple mountains majesty and the amber waves of grain.
Yeah, which are mentioned in the commercial.
Absolutely.
At the beginning.
We see the people, but there are also massive clouds of smoke indicating destruction, and then
there's helicopters.
The helicopters flying around.
Yeah, because this is a national emergency.
And again, it's a very sort of Romero Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead kind of ending of like, yes, our little family is okay, but look at everything else.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, like this isn't over, and it's also letting you know that like even though Red's gone, her message is gonna happen and things like that. Like I said, and the movie ends, and then you're stuck thinking about it for weeks. I think that. But one thing I want to pause real quick before we get off is this, and this is a theory I saw on dreads.com, which I think is a horror website, but I've seen it other places. Is Jason tethered?
Really?
Real quick, he left his trick there last year, but doesn't know how to work it. Could he have been swapped in the meantime? He's the one that doesn't have rhythm in the car when they're listening to the song, right? She tries to show him how to snap along with the song. He never quite gets on rhythm. He's always wearing his mask. He loves that mask, right? This is interesting. Instead of a sandcastle at the beach, he's digging a tunnel. The girls even say that. They're like, what were you building? Because it was a tunnel. And they go, that was stupid. The twins.
And Zora says he's just weird.
And the twins say, your brother's really weird. Again, it's important. It's brought up. When there are reasons against it. But and then the look at them at the end is it a moment of him fearing her, or is it a recognition? Like, are we safe? Is it really over? Because all she wants to do is go back to the world with sun and sky and strawberries that she's lived with for 30 years, right?
Right.
And so there's some theories out there. To me, against that theory is the idea that he was, she says he was born of fire or something like that, then. Would he be a fertile monster after just a year or so? Right.
It's an interesting thought, but
she seems very protective of Jason in the movie.
Yeah, but that's just natural.
It is. The second time through, because I had read that, there was just I don't know. It felt like she was overly protective of Jason, and it was just those little details. The tunnel was the big thing. The fact that they actually, but that just could just be an Easter egg.
Well, and also just part of the lot of themes, because if you, there are, when she's talking about things are lining up, there seem to be signs, and there is a little bit of a supernatural element to the clock being 11:11 when the frisbee gets thrown. Like there's also a lot of sort of this is just going to be fun. Like, I think Jordan Peele had a lot of fun with the little bits and pieces.
And it's exactly like he did in Get Out, where Allison Williams at the end of the movie is eating her Cheerios without milk because she's keeping the whites and the colored separate. Or not her Cheerios, her Fruit Loops. Sorry, she's got Fruit Loops in one bowl and drinking her milk, but she's keeping her whites and her colors separated. So there are... he loves... And that's the eye of a sketch comedian. Those details, that's his comedic eye.
Well, it's the eye of and man, we really didn't get to talk a whole lot about this, but and we've got to wrap it up. But it is for sure the payoff, the setup and the punchline, very much elements of comedy. But I think a lot of his skills also, and his attention to detail, as you said, remind me a lot of Kubrick.
No, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, he's got more of a. No, he's a very. It's interesting. I would not have guessed it, even coming out of Get Out. Honestly, as much as I like the movie, you never know. But I think we're seeing the emergence of a major filmmaker.
I agree.
And not just some comedian who made a good movie or something, but a legitimate major filmmaker who's going to have some things to say. And I will say this real quick. Last year, 2018, you might be listening to this 5 years from now, who knows? But 2018 was the best, without question, year in the history of black cinema.
For sure.
From a financial standpoint, an artistic standpoint, from Black Panther becoming the second or third highest grossing film of all time, a film that is unabashedly black, not like, and then to films like Blind Spotting, If Beale Street Could Talk, Sorry to Bother You, and then to not a lesser extent, but and then at the end of the year in Spider-Man Into the Multiverse, that had white filmmakers, but it was a big year for black films, black filmmakers. And Jordan Peele, even though he didn't have a film in 2018, he bookended that year, is also one of those voices that is coming out in our fight to get representation. And it goes back to the conversation we had at the beginning about him saying he was, planning on casting mostly black leads in his movies, is that representation comes from behind the camera. People instinctually want to tell stories about people like them, about themselves. And so the only way to fix what's in front of the camera is to fix what's behind the camera. And to give someone, and what I love about what he did in this film, and what a lot of them do, I mean, you look at something like The Big Sick as well, with a Pakistani lead, like I said, with Kumail. A lot of these films, there's nothing, and what something that we already knew, but hopefully people are learning is completely, that it's just as relatable as anything else. that you can completely relate to a black family on screen as much as you would a white family, just like black families have been relating to white families forever.
And that is absolutely the perfect spot to, I think, close things up with. Yeah. So great movie. I definitely recommend it. A lot to talk about. I think it's about more than one thing. Yes.
But it's also just a very effective, fun movie. It just is. It's a good time.
Yeah, as soon as it comes out, I'll be buying it, and I'll be watching it over and over again and devouring. Yeah. My gosh, I hope we get a lot of interesting behind-the-scenes special features, commentary, whatever.
Commentary. I really like a commentary on this one. That would be really fascinating. He said some things about it, but I'd really like to hear. A commentary track would be phenomenal.
And I'm happy that he is willing to talk about it and isn't. As much as I respect an artist who's like, nope, I'm putting it out there, and you just figure it out. I love to hear his thoughts.
I love David Lynch, but he's never telling us shit.
Right, exactly.
And I'll leave it real quick with a quote from Jordan Peele from South by Southwest, where he said, "The monster we really need to look at has our face, and maybe the evil is us. That's why they look like them. It's not. It's not a new idea, but it's holding up the mirror to us and saying we're the problem. That these problems come from human beings. And like I said, I think it's very important that it's not supernatural, at least not in the traditional sense. But it's a good flick, and if you're old enough to remember Hands Across America, there's a little nostalgia trip with it too. So
awesome. Well, Chad, thank you so much for coming on, talking about this thing. Before we go, where can we find you online? What are you up to?
I quit Twitter. I feel 75 pounds lighter. So just chadjshonk.com. We'll have updates eventually. It got some cool stuff coming down the pipe. But that'll be the place to find stuff from. And you can order my book, Proxy, on Amazon, or watch the movie I wrote, Dakota Sky, on Amazon Prime.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Bye.
Okay, one thing I have to address is why this review is coming out so much later than the movie, because usually I try and be on top of things and have movie reviews out the week after. But what happened is Chad and I's schedules didn't quite link up. I really wanted to see the movie again, and then the day that I was supposed to go see it again, I ended up having to work. the original day that we were supposed to talk, I ended up having to work, and we were going to talk about, we were going to do the Us movie review, and then the Star Wars trailer dropped, which you can hear on episode 3 of the Needless Things minicast. We talk about the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker. So once we did end up talking, we had both seen Us twice, and I think had a better conversation for having seen it twice, and then knocked out the Rise of Skywalker minicast, which kind of needed to go up ASAP, and then Us, which I didn't have a slot for, and I didn't think I was... Excuse me, I needed some beverage. I didn't think I was going to have a slot for it this week, but then an idea I had kind of fell through, so now this goes up this week as it should. And considering it's... I can't say... I don't know where I rank it. I'm not going to rank it. I'm going to say it's one of my favorite movies of 2019 so far. It's certainly the one that has affected me the most, and as such, it's cool that this is the episode that's going up on my birthday. If you wish to wish me happy birthday, I am Phantom Troublemaker on Twitter and Instagram. I am Dave West on Facebook. Please join the Needless Things Podcast Facebook group, and remember, I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things Podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.